this isn't everything that you need to know, but if you know these things, your odds get a lot better. Here's what I'm talking about. A big thing is we want to be able to write well, but especially the straight and the simple news lead. And you'd be surprised how many people, both in the classroom and in the professions, have kind of a hard time with this, you know. So it helps if you read the news regularly so that you know what these straight news leads look like. The next thing, we kind of want to know our numbers. We don't have to be math majors, but we do want to get the numbers right. I want to talk again about straight news leads, okay? This is, you know, and let's kind of go back to the basics. You remember that the beginning of the story is called the lead, right? You know, let's think about a little bit what that means. You know, there are many different kinds of leads, but for online and print, it's a good idea to learn and generally go with the simplest and most common type, and that is this straight news lead. There's some good rules to follow that will help you write a good lead every time. And this will help you find not only jobs and internships in newsrooms, but many other places besides, because it gets to getting to the point of our writing. So, as you can see here, we're looking for a single paragraph, one sentence, less than 30 words. You know, it's good to mention this because as instructors, sometimes we'll get material in from even juniors and seniors and a whole paragraph of 300 words. And, you know, they haven't, good writing, of course, paragraphs help us separate ideas and achieve a hierarchy in our writing. It's really important, but especially in news writing, of course, right? And if we think in our own lives, how we encounter news online and in other places, you know, something has to grab us right up at the top. So that's what we're looking for. So we want the most newsworthy elements in there. What happened, where, and when. Let's say a typical example might be a semi-tractor trailer truck slammed into a car on Interstate 69 today, injuring 4 people, right? Very straightforward. The what is there's this truck slammed into a car. Notice the active verb. It slammed into a car. Not a car was hit by a truck today. The truck slammed into the car on Interstate 69, right? Now, if there was some unusual factor, we might lead with that. So suppose that police closed a 10-mile section of Interstate 69 south of Muncie today after a gasoline tanker truck crashed and began leaking, right? Could be the same event. A truck maybe hit a car, 4 people were injured, but if they had to close a big part of the interstate and the injuries weren't fatal, maybe this is what we'd be leading with, because this is what would be affecting the most people. So we were thinking about these news values that you learned about in so many of our classes. Let's talk about which of these best represents our idea of a straight news lead. Now, one thing to remember is we're talking about for online and print purposes, right? Because we write very differently when we're writing for the ear for broadcast in radio and television. We just do. In television, a lot of leads tend to sound like headlines. They may not have verbs, they may not be complete sentences, and so forth. And you could almost hear the TV anchor saying, "Sign of the times, crime again in the city. Man shot today while robbing couple." Well, even in that sort of abbreviated way, that doesn't really quite work, right? Crime again in the city. I mean, there may be 4 or 5 crime stories on a typical night in a city of 800,000 people, right? An elderly Indianapolis woman is alive tonight because of her quick-thinking husband. Do you see any potential issue with that? Do we know that she's definitely... Go ahead. What, Michelle?
Maybe quick-thinking is an opinion.
Well, yeah, suppose so, right. Definitely is sort of a little bit of editorializing, right? You know, it's kind of, you know, is she alive tonight? How do we know the guy was going to kill her? I mean, you know, many robberies happen without somebody being killed. We're making a presumption that she was going to be killed if her husband hadn't acted. Now, certainly her husband, and as you might well do for your loved one, you know, is not going to guess at the intentions of somebody holding a gun on their loved one, so they're going to do it. But we cannot make that leap, right? We can't make that jump. We can't say that she's alive tonight because of that. You know, lots of robberies happen the threat of force, and there's no. So as you can see here, and as most of our audience has determined, this is the straight news lead. A 76-year-old man shot a robbery suspect in the head today as the bandit pointed a gun at the man's wife. That's the basics, right? That's what we're looking for here. We're looking for a single sentence that sums up what's happening here. Again, not every story has to have a straight news lead, but it's the most basic form, and it's the type that we use for breaking news stories. And breaking news stories are the first job of a reporter. And they're the first job that our people are going to have when they go into newsrooms. You're going to be handed things to rewrite, like this police news release. You're going to be sent out somewhere. You need to master this form, and it'll do wonders for your employability. It really and truly will. Let's take a look at some real-life examples in the news, okay, to see how this form is used. Nick, can you read this for us?
Purdue University police evacuated the Schliemann Hall of Student Services at the heart of campus after an employee in the building received a phone call stating a bomb was in the building, University spokesman Jim Bush said. At 11:10 a.m. Wednesday, Purdue Police Dispatch received a call from an employee who said she took a phone call from a woman with an international accent and that the woman said there was a bomb in the building and they needed to get out now.
Now, I will note, Nick, you're a broadcaster, and that sounded really good. And even though it's not at all written in broadcast form, there's a voice to it. There's a voice to any kind of writing, even that writing which is going to be read purely in a text form online or something like that. And I thought that this was a good example. This is something that's going on right now. There's no time to say, college can be a disturbing place sometimes, particularly in this day and age of events that happen on campuses across the country, right? You know what? Let's get down to business here, right? The cops evacuated this building at the heart of campus after an employee received a phone call stating a bomb was in the building. So you have all of these really good elements here. And so the lead of the story is the first sentence. Sometimes we talk about the top of the story, which might be the first 2 or 3 sentences or something like that. And I put the top in here just to give you an idea kind of where they were going here, right? Is it important that, should the lead say that a woman with an international accent said there was a bomb in there? Is that important? Does that belong in the lead? Why or why not?
I think it's information that you can, or that doesn't belong in the lead. I think it's not necessary in the lead.
Michelle?
I don't think it should be in the lead either, because that kind of shows that maybe they think people with international accents are more suspicious than people with an American accent.
Yeah, that's true, right. If you raise that to the lead, if that's one of the most important things that you think is in the story, I agree with you. I don't think that it belongs there. I think it's interesting information. We want to know what they know, and so it belongs in there somewhere. This story was pretty early in the process. There was more to this. There wasn't a lot that they know, so they put everything that they do know. A farmland man was intoxicated when his minivan struck and seriously injured a bicyclist Monday night. Randolph County Sheriff Ken Hendrickson said Alvin B. Acree, 54, was arrested on a preliminary charge of driving with a controlled substance in system causing serious bodily injury. They're using the form there, the exact form of the charge from the Indiana Code. So it reads a little awkwardly. Charge of driving with a controlled substance in system causing serious bodily injury. So again, very straightforward. I guess another way to put this is a bicyclist was seriously injured Monday night in Randolph County when he was struck by a motorist in a minivan who police later arrested on a charge of, you could kind of flip it around that way.
And that's a really good point, isn't it? Which is more important, the injury or the arrest, and the reason for the arrest? You make a good case for both, but they both belong in the lead, don't they?
I think they do. Yeah, I think this is, and so a straight news lead is sometimes called a summary news lead, right? You summarize the most important parts. There may be one major thing that sticks out, but often there'll be 2 or 3, a what, a where, and a when. And this form, and I like to study this, and I like to think about these and kind of reverse engineer them and think about, well, why did they write it that way? And the more of this, we're looking here at 4 stories. We have one more. Just as the more of these you read, the more you internalize this form the way it needs to be come out from your fingers. All right. Professor Bremen, could you read this one, Professor Bremen?
I'd love to. I collect these. City police said a Facebook-related feud between 2 Muncie cousins resulted in one of the men being shot Monday. Quincy Deshawn Stringer Sr., 30, of the 1100 block of South Franklin Street, was arrested about 5:30 p.m. on preliminary charges of intimidation and pointing a loaded firearm. Authorities allege Stringer threatened his 34-year-old cousin, Albert Ellis III, with a 9mm handgun. That hyphen doesn't belong in AP style, comma. Although another Muncie resident, Carletha Marie Wills, 22, of the 2500 block of North Elgin Street, is accused of firing the gun, shooting Ellis in the left ankle. And what's the problem with this story? I want to know more about Facebook sooner.
Yeah,
That's the only reason most of us are going to care about the story.
Yeah, that's
All
a
this
very
is
good point.
important, but I want to know more about Facebook.
You know, you make a good point. You can be, this would, I think this is an excellent point. This fits the description of the top of one of these straight news stories, but here you've got this Facebook angle. Yeah, I agree with you. I think we'd need to know what had happened. I'm working from memory, but there was a little bit of elaboration on Facebook. You'd say, yeah, we should pull that up a little bit later, but I think you're right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about numbers and the news, okay? Numbers and the news. This is going to be very, very quick. This is a consciousness-raising exercise, okay? Numbers and the news. I have here a little screen grab from NewsLab. NewsLab.org has lots of resources, but they like to talk about getting the numbers right. A lot of us kid about not being too good at math, and it's an old truism that reporters aren't, but we should be, right? Because if we get the numbers wrong in a story, we end up having to write corrections, and it damages our credibility overall. And today, I think more than ever, people are trying to throw wrong numbers at us. Remember, the old adage is that figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And there's a lot of bogus statistics thrown around, and we need to really be aware of that. It's good to remember the old basic rule of journalism. Does this make sense? When we're presented with something, does this make sense or not? Suppose somebody told you that 65% of students prefer Coca-Cola and 37% prefer Pepsi. You know, under the does that make sense thing, we question everything. In fact, there was the City News Bureau had an old adage, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. Always check it out. You see any problem with this? You saw this in the headline? The numbers add up to more than 100%, right? So you immediately go, wait a minute. And it used to be, in the print world, for instance, there were many layers of editors above us who, you know, if we did something silly like overlook an obvious mistake, somebody else would catch it. Well, today, you're likely is not going to be in a newsroom where you're pushing a button and there's nobody standing between you and the internet and eternal embarrassment. People make screen grabs of errors and share them, put them on Facebook. Oh, look what they did. Always check your numbers. You know, political commentator Chris Matthews once said that the president had added only 13 people to the federal workforce in 2009, and that the total number of people working for the U.S. government was only 4,443. And, you know, does this make sense? Turns out, as the website Conquer Math pointed out, check what the Office of Personnel Management showed, there were in fact 4,430,000 federal employees. See, he had gotten it wrong by a factor of 1,000, not 4,443, but multiply that by 1,000, 4,430,000. The president actually increased the number of employees federally by 13,000, not 13. Okay, so this is just when stuff looks wrong, we look at the data and take a sniff at it and see if it makes any sense.
Can I interject something?
So those are just the three things I wanted to mention. I wanted to talk about just the incredible value of being able to write a straight news lead. Just often overlooked, often taken for granted, but sometimes what you'll find out is people say, "Well, I already know how to do that," and they really, really don't. So I find myself when I get the opportunity to write something, I'm looking at it with fresh eyes every now and then and thinking, well, is this really the best way to tell this? And use of numbers is critical, and fortunately there's some really good resources out there. If we get in the habit of questioning any numbers that we see, I just do it as a habit by now. If I'm reading a story and there are numbers in it, I'm like, really? I just want to double check. And then this visual storytelling, light video, the incredible capability of these phones, which just keeps growing. So it's with that in mind, I just wanted to talk with you about some possibilities of using this gear and these techniques.